Okay, so here we are live once again with another Mcfarlane Super Friends unboxing, and this is Lex Luthor, the leader of the Legion of Doom, the ruler of Australia. Yes. So ready to open this guy up. Pretty excited about this one. Lex has had a few looks throughout the years that have been considered definitive, that many folks might consider definitive, and that's your Lex Luthor. There's three that I think kind of stand out to me as the best looks for Lex Luthor. You've got the black suit with the white shirt and tie and vest, like on Superman the animated series. I really like that look for Lex Luthor. If you're gonna go with evil businessman Lex Luthor, that's the best look, no doubt. And then you've got the superpowers, the armored suit, the Lexorian war suit. Everybody calls it the superpowers armor, but it did appear in the comics first. But I suspect they designed it so it could be used in the upcoming Kenner action figure line, something to make him look a little more toyetic, as it were. And then, last and certainly not least, you've got this look, his what's often called his Legion of Doom look. But again, it predates the Legion of Doom. It was in the comics in the mid 70s, before the animated series, and first appeared in a story called Lex Luthor Super Scalp Hunter, and then kind of became his definitive outfit after that. Before that, Luthor would just kind of wear regular street clothes, or even just still be wearing the prison grays that he broke out of prison wearing his prison uniform and just never bothered to change out of it, because he's hell bent on destroying Superman. So he just charges straight into his plan. But you just wear a suit or lab coat or whatever. Luthor didn't really have like a costume until the 1970s when they introduced this. And there was like occasionally like where he'd have like I remember he got Superman type powers once and had like a kind of a purple Superman looking outfit. It didn't look exactly like Superman's outfit, but it was almost kind of a palette swap of it, where it was purple and green. It had those kind of flares on the shoulder. I remember that. And oddly enough, that wasn't even really a Superman story. That was a Supergirl story. So anyway, Lex Luthor first appeared on the Challenge of the Super Friends cartoon series as a member of the Legion of Doom, and that was how he first showed up in Super Friends. But he did have a few episodes that he appeared in after that. I believe during World's Greatest Super Friends, he was in an episode that was obviously meant to cash in on Superman the movie. He was still wearing this outfit, still had this design, but he had an underground lair that looked exactly like the one that Gene Hackman had in the movie, and had a bumbling sidekick who looked pretty much exactly like Ned Beatty as Otis, but he had a different, like Wilbur Gump or something like that. He had a different name. So like we have Otis at home kind of thing. He was even dumber than the regular Otis too. Like part of Luthor's plan was to change the color of the sun to red, so Superman would lose his powers. And when he says, "Yes, I'm going to have them change the sun to red," and uh, the Otis character is like, "That's brilliant, boss. Then when Superman's painting it yellow again, we can take over." Yeah, so we got the same piece of artwork on the back. This is typical of this line, and the Batman 66 line that was the predecessor of it, where the artwork is pretty much on the back, but there's nothing distinctive at all to tell us that this is a Lex Luthor figure, actually. It's interesting that it's got a list of characters on here that are copyrighted, and one of the characters mentioned is Blue Beetle, but I do not see Blue Beetle on this packaging anywhere. So that's odd. So I guess maybe he just got lumped in with all the other characters because he's one they want to protect, especially for whatever reason. The only thing I see that denotes this specifically as being Luthor is right above the UPC code. You see where it says Lex Luthor. That's it. So there's no like the 66 figures give us like a portrait of the like the digital render of the figure, at least a little something to show us like what the figure is on the back. I mean, you don't really need that because obviously he's right there in a bubble, but it'd be nice to see something on there, I guess. Oh well, whatever. It's too late to change it now, and I'm a little too OCD to want them to change it after we've already had like at least one wave of this, and probably the second wave is almost certainly going to match up with this. Oh, so there's a trading card that comes with these. Pull that off, and I talked about the trading card a little bit on the Riddler episode, but some of you might be wondering why didn't he read the back of the trading card like he usually does? Well, that's because there's nothing really to read on the back of the trading card. Here's what the back of the trading card looks like. And so there's no bio on the backs of these. So here's the Riddler card. So you can see they are identical on the back. I didn't even change the order that the figures are in. So you got the 5 characters that are part of this wave on here: Batman, Lex Luthor, Green Lantern, the Riddler, and Sinestro. And of course, I have all these figures already. We'll be opening up the rest of them this week. There's the picture of Lex that we get on the front. There we go. And I do, even though I'm disappointed there's not a bio on the back or anything like, character specific. They're all identical on the back. But I do like the design of it. And longtime comic book fans, if you were a fan of comics in the 1970s or a fan of comics from the 1970s, you don't have to be from back then. You just have to be a fan of the comics from back then. You could be born in like the 90s or the 2000s and still have an appreciation for classic comic books. But anybody who is really familiar with like the house ads of comics in the 1970s will recognize this as being based on one of the DC Comics house ads for their DC TV subline of books, one of which was based on Super Friends. And there were other comics based on TV shows, both that DC owned the rights to, like Shazam, or that they licensed from whoever owned those characters, like say Isis or Welcome Back Cotter. A lot of people think that Isis is a DC character because of her connection with Shazam on the live action show, but she wasn't actually a DC character. She was an original character created by Filmation. That having been said, since the goddess Isis is a public domain character, DC was able to do their own version of Isis, who is connected to the Shazam mythos and does look very similar to the Filmation version of Isis. But I'm sure that's a coincidence. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this guy out of his package and talk about his accessories and some of the eccentricities about this particular figure, because I do have some things to say about that. And yes, there are parts used from other figures on here, but not as many as there often are on these type of figures. There's a lot of new parts on Lex Luthor. So Luthor's accessories that he comes with is he comes with this communication device / remote control / really whatever you want to use it for. And I'm sure it's based off of some kind of doohickey that Lex used on the cartoon. And this particular device, which honestly, I don't remember this one. I don't remember this one at all. And I'd like to be able to like rattle off some encyclopedic knowledge of exactly what devices Luthor used in the cartoon show over the years, but I don't have the foggiest as to what this thing is. So it's kind of a cool looking laser rifle type device. So you could probably, again, you can use these things as anything you want to. They're toys. You just use your imagination pretend it's whatever you want. So unlike the Riddler, Luthor does have, it looks like, double rubber tabs around his ankles. So he's got a little bit extra holding him in. And then he's got double rubber tabs for some reason up around his chest straps. I don't know why they bothered to wrap them all the way up there, but let's go ahead and cut them off. Get those off of there. Make sure I get both of those rubber straps broken. I don't want to deal with those. And then we can get Lex Luthor out of the package. And you see how they really needed the extra rubber tabs to hold him in there. You see how firmly he's in the package, because we wouldn't want him to just come flying out now, would we? All right. Okay, so now we got him out of the package. And something that I noticed about this figure that I found kind of odd is look how baggy and wrinkled his sleeves are. He almost looks like a David Cornsweat Superman. They're so baggy and wrinkled. So it struck me as odd that that they chose to give him such loose sleeves like that. And I'm like, why? Why did they do that? And I started to think, what figure might have sleeves like that we would have previously seen in the Batman line? And the first one that came to mind was this guy, Mr. Freeze. So you can see that they actually reused Mr. Freeze's arms on Lex Luthor. Now, why did they do this? I think the reason why is because of the gloves. They wanted him to have like the kind of long gloves like that. And if you look at the Batman 66 figures, there's not many figures that have long gloves like that. But they wound up putting out this Riddler figure at the same exact time, and they just sculpted him some longer gloves, which, of course, as I pointed out on that unboxing, the Frank Gorshin figure did not have longer gloves like that. So what's the deal? Why didn't they just use the Riddler's arms again? I think that would have looked better than these Mr. Freeze arms. And Mr. Freeze is wearing like a baggy jumpsuit, like David Cornsweat Superman. So he's supposed to have kind of loose fitting sleeves like that. But if we look at how Lex is drawn on the cartoon, yeah, he's got a tight fitting spandex top there. Now, sometimes in the comics, they would draw this to be more like a jacket. But even then, like it was a little bit of a more of a tight fitting jacket than this was. So I don't know what the deal is with that. I don't know why they chose to do it like that. But it's still a nice looking figure, so I'm not going to complain about it too much. But I did feel like I needed to point it out. Bobby Wald says, wasn't Luthor's whole deal with Superman was because of an experiment gone wrong? And he went bald. Yes, they actually even adapted that story as an episode of Challenge of the Super Friends, which you may recall. But yeah, in the comic book, Luthor's origin that was introduced during the Silver Age, it was not like from the beginning, but in the Silver Age, in an issue of was it Adventure Comics? I think it was Adventure Comics, rather than the Superboy comics proper. But Lex Luthor was introduced as a teenage boy who had recently moved to Smallville, and was actually a big fan of Superboy. In fact, Superboy had been felled by a kryptonite meteor, and Luthor, who Superboy happened to land near his farm, was doing chores with his tractor and used the tractor to push the kryptonite meteor into a nearby ravine where it was no longer affecting Superboy. And Superboy was very grateful to Lex Luthor for saving his life. And Lex tells him that, shows him his laboratory where he's actually got like a Superboy shrine, because, Superboy is like his hero. And basically, Lex's lab is just kind of like this ramshackle shack, and Superboy, to show his gratitude for Lex saving his life, builds him like a high-tech laboratory, state of the art in, I guess would have been 1920, whenever the Superboy stories were originally supposed to take place. And uh, Luthor, being so grateful to Superboy for building him a laboratory, decides to make a cure for kryptonite. So as he's making a cure for kryptonite, he accidentally creates a living protoplasm. Lex Luthor actually creates life, and you can see like the protoplasm actually starts to develop hands. So who knows what would have happened with this protoplasm if not for what happened next? Is that Lex Luthor, in his excitement, accidentally knocks over some chemicals and starts a fire, and the fumes from the chemicals is actually what causes his hair to fall out. It's not natural like some of us. Anyway, Superboy happens to fly by and see the building burning down, and Luthor just goes mad with jealousy and blames Superboy for the fire, saying that he started the fire because he was jealous of Superboy's genius, and that from now on they were enemies, and blamed him for the loss of his protoplasm that he was never going to be able to recreate. Now, here's another fun fact about Silver Age Lex Luthor and the protoplasm and all that stuff, is in the post-crisis era, when they introduced that pocket universe for to explain where Superboy came from in the Legion of Superheroes. Afterwards, after Superboy, that version of Superboy died, that world was left without a hero, and Lex Luthor, who was, had just moved to Smallville and hadn't met Superboy ever, but, always admired him. Pete Ross, after the Kents had died, showed him where no sense in hiding anymore. Clark Kent was Superboy. Let me show you where his lab was. Maybe you can use something of that to help mankind. And Luthor accidentally unleashes the Phantom Zone villains. And since in this version Luthor didn't accidentally burn down his own laboratory, the protoplasm that he invents, he eventually evolves to the point where it becomes that universe's version of Supergirl. So that was the Matrix version of Supergirl, the shape-shifting protoplasm Supergirl. Was created by the Silver Age Lex Luthor, at least the Pocket Universe version of him. Anyway, that's a whole nother tangent. Maybe we can talk about the post-crisis version of Supergirl at some other point. But let's talk about the action figure, since that's what we're here to talk about mostly. So the likeness on the figure, I think, is really good and looks a lot like the way that Luthor was drawn on the show, especially in terms of the sculpt. He's got that same sort of evil grin that we'd often see on Luthor's face. The same cheekbones, same laugh lines. You can they had a very distinctive way of drawing Lex on Super Friends, and I think they caught it. And that's kind of what I think of Lex Luthor as looking like anyway. So yeah, he's got the right nose, the right chin, the right cheekbones, the right proportions of the face. He looks like specifically the Super Friends version of Lex Luthor. I do think that as far as like the eyebrows go, they probably could have. This is as far as the paint masking. They probably could have made the eyebrows just like slightly thicker. I do think they seem to be like just a little more delicate than Lex Luthor's eyebrows actually are. This is a new head sculpt, new torso sculpt with the high collar and the bandoliers. You can see he's got little capsules all over his suit that he could have various devices implanted into, and they even got the rocket boots on there, which is something that oftentimes is neglected in action figures of Lex Luthor. Sometimes they'll just have other capsules on there. Sometimes they'll have nothing at all. But in this case, they actually got the little rockets off to the sides of his boots. He does not have the pain-inducing devices on the knuckles like he had in the comic book. I don't remember if he had those even on Super Friends. It would have been just extra stuff to animate. But you can see the way they had the distinctive belt buckle and the green stripes around the belt. They got all that. They captured all that very nicely. So yeah, this is I don't know if the trunk piece is new. That might be reused from something else. But the legs are certainly new, and the torso is certainly new. So the only things I know for certain that they reused are the arms that came with Mr. Freeze. So yeah, let's go ahead and have a look at him with some of these accessories. And again, like with the Riddler, Lex only has one gripping hand, and the other hand's a solid fist. So he can only hold on to one accessory at a time. And here he is with the communicator, remote control device, whatever you want to consider that. So this arm is kind of sticky, but I'll talk about that more when I get to the articulation. And then we've got this blaster rifle, which there he is with that. So that's fun. Unfortunately, since he only has like one gripping hand, that means he can't really hold the rifle in like a two-handed grip like you might want him to, unless you just kind of like balance it on top of his fist like that. And that doesn't look too bad, I don't think. So yeah, that's the accessories he comes with. So it's a nice looking figure. I do wish, like I said, they use some different arms on him. I don't think these arms work as well as they might have hoped. But overall, I think it's still a good looking figure. So let's go ahead and talk about his articulation. Lex can look up about that far, which is not that far. Look down about that far. Tilt his head kind of slightly quizzically from side to side. I don't think these heads are necessarily engineered to really have the kind of side to side movement. I think they're just supposed to rotate all the way around. And in the case of Lex, it's going to kind of bump into the collar a little bit, so be aware of that. But any kind of like up and down, side to side kind of movement, that's more of a happy accident, I think. Just consider that a bonus. Of course, the arms rotate all the way around at the shoulders, but like I said, really stiff on this one. So he just needs to loosen up just because he's a new figure. But they were not wanting to move at all. I've just kind of gently coaxed these. Never force your action figure joints. That's a good way to break them. So never force them. Gentle coaxing will usually do the trick. If you just kind of just try to move it a little bit. And if that's not bringing you any give, apply heat to it. I like to use a hairdryer. In extreme cases, I might actually boil some water. You might just prefer to boil water if that's your thing, but I like the hairdryer. That's my preferred method. He does have the typical of these Mcfarlane retro figures is the single joint of articulation at the elbow. So bends up about that far, rotates all the way around, and then of course the wrists rotate all the way around. They're a little stiff on mine, but not anywhere near as bad as some of the other ones I've had in the past, though. So that's good. Lex Luthor rotates all the way around at the waist. He can kick up about that far. Can't kick back very far at all because he's actually got butt cheeks sculpted onto his posterior, whereas with the Frank Gorshin Riddler figure, we were able to kick his leg back because usually the butt cheeks are sculpted onto the thighs instead of being sculpted onto the hips or waist or whatever you want to call that. So Lex cannot kick back far. He can only kick forwards. And then he's got a single joint of articulation at the knee, which is very stiff, and rotates all the way around. There we go. So, great looking figure, pretty typical articulation for this line of figures. Not quite as good as what we're used to with Multiverse, but still a little bit better than Superpowers, kind of somewhere in between the two of those. So I think that's pretty much it for Lex Luthor. I don't have a whole heck of a lot else to say about him other than, I really wanted to see them do this version of Lex in Superpowers. And the closer that we get to the end of Mcfarlane's license, the less likely it looks like that's going to be. And honestly, if you'd have made this figure like say about the same height as a superpowers figure, I would think that this would be the perfect superpowers Lex Luthor figure, at least, as far as the Legion of Doom suit goes. We already have the vintage, the classic Lex Luthor in the Lexorian armor. So if you're a fan of that look, and I'm a fan of that look too, at least we have a great Lex Luthor figure in superpowers already. But it would have been really nice to get this suit in the superpower scale. As it is, I'm just glad to have it at all. So and it looks really nice. Like and they could do them in multiverse too. I would really like to have this version of Lex in multiverse. I think that would be awesome. But as we get closer to towards the end of the line, that does seem to be less and less likely. Maybe I'll turn out to be completely wrong about that. Hopefully, I will turn out to be completely wrong about that. There's a lot of cool stuff I think that McFarlane still has time to do in the at this point about a year left they have on the license, because I believe it's June of next year, and here we are almost halfway through, like a third of the way through June at least. So time just keeps slipping into the future. So oh, and since we don't have the Super Friends version of Superman out yet, we can see him at least next to the kind of crappy version of Superman from the Batman 66 line. And the Super Friends version is going to reuse a lot of these same parts, but thankfully going to have a new neck piece, so he's not going to have where the cape connects in this awful way. That's what really ruins this figure for me. I know a lot of people don't like the head sculpt. I don't think the head sculpt is that good, but it's not that horrible either. It's just kind of like generic looking. But I really did not like the way that the cape attached to the shoulders. And I am pretty particular about that. If you've talked to me about the David Cornspan Superman suit, you should know that. So anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure that you like and subscribe and all the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Lex Luthor, both this figure specifically and the character in general. We're going to be back on the next episode with more Super Friends and specifically more Legion of Doom, because the next figure I'm going to open is one of my favorite comic book supervillains of all time, Sinestro, and that will finish out the Legion of Doom characters that we have in this wave, and then we'll move on to the heroes, Green Lantern and Batman. And of course, Batman's going to be a twofer episode, because I do have the Platinum Edition Universe of Evil Batman in his red costume, so that should be fun to open up. But that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Bye.